Thanks for the intro. So for those of you who don't know Unit 42, we're a part of an organization called Palo Alto Networks, who you may have heard of. You may or may not have heard of Unit 42, but we are the threat intelligence and incident response part of Palo Alto Networks. So we each year do hundreds of cybersecurity incident responses and help organizations work proactively to reduce the impact of incidents. And we're noticing trends, and we're noticing trends in how those incidents happen and how organizations might be able to prevent them. And today, really, I want to bring some of those insights from the last year. We've recently released a very sort of practical guide to some of these insights we've seen. And I want to bring some of those to you to show you some of the threat trends and also some of the trends on how people are getting in. So, as was just said then, we can try as a team to outmaneuver those threats with a threat-led view. So, let's start. So Unit 42, we're sitting on a huge bucket of threat intelligence that's been collected since about 2015, where we started, from all the technologies that Palo Alto Networks have created and deployed across the globe, and also all these threat incidents we're doing. We are processing all this data and seeing attack trends, both at the real tactical level of what's firing off on all the tools that we have, but also really at the attacker and threat actor view. And we're building a picture of these campaigns that we publish in our threat reports, but also take into you as customers. So I'm going to share a little bit about what we're seeing, and half an hour for what's in my head is a very short period of time, and I might get to a chance where we can chat about some of the implications of this. So forgive me if I start speeding up and rattling through, but I really want to invite thoughts and reflections from you as an organization. In this conversation, I'm going to highlight 5 things that we're seeing. First of all, there's a shift to active disruption of organizations' operations. And I'm not talking just about encrypting of some data for ransomware, but actively targeting to try and bring your organization to its knees so that you're more likely to pay the ransom or to do whatever their objectives are there. It's no surprise, but software supply chain and delivery logistics supply chain is causing operational impact in your organizations and in those supply chains. The knock-on impact of something upstream in your supply chain can impact you and your organizations, and we're seeing a lot more of those impacts. The worrying stats that I'll bring in a minute is the sheer speed and scale, which I've been doing this job for many, many years, and we used to talk about the dwell time of incidents being hundreds of days. Now we're talking literally a few hundred minutes, if that. Arguably stuff still is sitting on your network for many days and months, but there's a lot of stuff that's happening within hours that we need to be thinking about. We'll also bring some insights around the insider threat. I'm not just talking about your employees, I'm talking about your employees that are actually working for somebody else as well. We start looking about people that are impersonating employees within your organization and the real impacts that might be having on your teams and your business. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about the AI impacts on the threat landscape and what's happening around that. So let's start first of all, business impact. And by this I mean organizations that are being hit by intentional disruption of business processes and services that bring down your key business objectives. And that could be through negatively impacting your brand by publishing the fact that they've got your data and making a point of that. We've also had some incidents where the threat actor has been tipping off the regulatory bodies that there's an incident in progress. Right? So that's very kind that they're doing your incident notifications for you, right? And deciding that it's a data breach. That's great. Sometimes you're sitting there not sure whether you should do it yourself. They're taking that call. Unfortunately, there's an extra phone call to pick up there. But they might be targeting your key data systems, your operational systems, and deliberately targeting that. This extra noise is obviously furthering their business model, and maybe you're getting better at restoring your encrypted systems, you're preventing them. They're starting to shift and be a little bit more clever. And this is only being made easier by the use of Gen AI. Right? So those interactions are now spell checked, grammar checked, and the same way that maybe our talk intros and other stuff are, and things like that we're using. So it's getting harder for organizations to actively spot that they're up against these threat actors. You can imagine that regulatory email that goes out that's being created by, hey, can you just check this? I'm writing to the ICO, I want it to sound like this. It's quite scary. And finally, people are using cloud expertise in probably ways that many of our security operation teams don't even have themselves. I'll show you an instant example in a minute where with Scattered Spider or Muddled Libra, they tend to know more about your environments, how to navigate around them, than many of your own IT people. They don't have to log change tickets, they just go in and move around, right? And that's why they can do it quickly. They don't have to arrange a Zoom call to get people together to get the access, they're in there. And that's where the scary timescales happen. So if we look at speed, last year I was saying that half the cases that we were working with, compromised or data exfiltration, was happening in under a day. Okay. In 20% of our cases that we've worked on this last year, data exfiltration was happening in less than an hour. So it's a point of the first phishing email being answered, or the first vulnerability being exploited, to that threat actor being able to find data of interest and being able to exfiltrate it. Most of this stuff is pretty quiet. Right? If you're using an access broker and those credentials have already been stolen and been sitting out there and somebody's just bought those, they literally have a bunch of logons that they can just get in and start to move around. Okay? This is really concerning because how many of our teams are able to spot that level of threat actor activity and respond to that in under an hour? Not many of us. Just a couple of stats of the size of the volumes that happen in these incidents. So there was a municipal government that we worked on. Their VPN was lacking MFA. So the threat actor managed to get in. Within 7 hours, they'd exfiltrated 500 gigs of data. Okay. You'd think that would be spotted. Large scale uploads, responded to over 7 hours. At what point in that 500 gig would you expect your SOC to have created an alert and investigated it and cut that off? 5 gig, 10 gig, 500 gig? That organization wasn't able to spot that level of data upload somehow. Their SOC wasn't spotting it, or their service provider wasn't spotting it. Another one, there was a university with a brute force. That threat actor managed to find a unmanaged device that didn't have the EDR on it. Awesome. And within 18 hours, they deployed ransomware, and they'd managed to start exfiltrating data. Another challenge, unmanaged devices. You've got your security tools deployed, and you're monitoring your time to detect. What about the time when you're not detecting stuff on those unmanaged assets? I'm painting this really positive picture, aren't I? Sorry about this, right? But this does drive the need for automation. It drives the need for us to be thinking like the attacker. There's this SANS instructor I did some work with, and he had the moniker of think red, act blue. So what are our attackers doing from the red team side, and what are we doing to understand them and to act like them? So if they're using AI, how do we use AI better? How do we automate? How do we create scale? Here's an example. Like I say, Muddled Libra. I could talk for an hour on this. It's a really fascinating example, but they got in, first of all, by bypassing MFA, by calling the help desk. Opportunity there. How many of you, I bet most of you in your organizations do cybersecurity awareness training. How many of you do a specific one for your help desks to make them understand that they might be up against this? Wonderful. And there's probably a few others there that weren't quick enough off the mark. But others I'm talking to, people go, oh yeah, good point. Maybe we need to do a tailored playbook for that help desk to spot what's happening. By the time they'd been given domain credentials, within 40 minutes, they'd managed to add themselves to various different groups. They'd got admin and basically had unlocked the entire environment. At this point, they were able to create their own VMs that weren't being tracked and download and deploy a whole bunch of tools, and then they were sorted. They started to connect to legitimate cloud storage, so they were able to start uploading to Google or AWS or others in a way that, we use Google, so why not? That's fine. That's a legitimate upload. It must be marketing team, hey? And they were able to exfiltrate data. Along the way, this team regularly start to find access to your own security tools and start to use that. They can deactivate your EDRs, they can uninstall it, they can delete alerts, they can start to use the console in the way that your teams do. We find that quite regularly, and we can know it's them because we notice a login to an EDR tool at middle of the night, and we ask the IR team we're working with, was that you? No. Well, it wasn't us. Somebody else is using your security tools. Okay, that's why you need things like MFA, and you need to be tracking who's using your tools and when, right? It's also why you don't want to keep your install passwords on clear text in places that a threat actor can find. I've seen that recently, okay? You're deploying your tools, you've got the MFA set up, you get everything else, but if you've got an install script in something like SSCM that's got that password in plain text, attacker's going to find that and they can uninstall all your EDRs. Go check that one. Okay. Some other interesting insights. So Gen AI, okay. I do these talks fairly regularly, and each time new things are out there, and I'd love to talk to some of you about what we're seeing here, but let's just think about the three areas we're seeing where Gen AI is helping organizations. First of all, in terms of attack generation. We are seeing some creative ways of threat actors using Gen AI and AI to codify OSINT collection and recon analysis. So they're looking for you and your organization and what can they find out about it. They might be scraping LinkedIn to see what technologies you have and what you may have recently deployed. You know, the account manager that started to suddenly post and cross-post and like somebody's messages and then is saying, hey, look, I'm on my boat, might indicate that they've just bought a whole bunch of stuff from that vendor. But when people are putting up job postings, right? How many times do you put a list of technologies that you want, you're desiring, right? That's a use case for somebody to scrape information from you using Gen AI. It's also being used to increase the speed and scale of said recon. It's being used to, like I say, create phishing campaigns and create those marketing chains in the same way as we do when we're trying to encourage people to events or you're trying to do your awareness. Here's the first email, second email. You can start creating chatbots so that if you are interacting with an organization as a threat actor, you can make it feel real. It's never that real though, thinking back to my broadband going down last week. I haven't quite got there yet. The other things that they're doing, code reviews, code scans, actually being able to create those more efficient payloads. We're not seeing, LLM creating malware from the ground up, but there's a good way of debugging software, and it's just speeding up the process. In the same way, our teams are looking at how we're using AI in our organizations. And that's the challenge. Our organizations are already using AI as well, internally. But our security teams, if we're still over here worrying about what data feeds to be bringing in and how to connect them, and we're not thinking about how to automate our data flows and processes, then our threat actors are already miles ahead of us. So as well as looking to see how we can protect the business and the business's use of AI, we also need to be spending time within our own organizations, from a security organization, how we can use AI to accelerate our own aspects. So if the threat actor is using Gen AI to do recon, how can we use Gen AI internally to do recon and understand who's doing what? Is there a way that we can understand the changes in our organization that's happening, where the risk profile might be changing, and presenting that back to a SOC in a more readable way or in a more automated fashion? Can we cut down some of those Zoom calls that we're waiting for with the infrastructure teams? Is there a way of integrating data sources better? Is there a way of us working quicker by using automation? Is there a way of us being able to make our triage processes more effective? using Gen AI? Yes, there's a lot of opportunities. If we look at how organizations are getting in, it probably comes as no surprise that phishing is still up there. It's taken the top spot. Last year we had a few rather large, if people remember the previous year, some rather large software vulnerabilities, things like Move It and others that were impacting a lot of our organizations, where there were some large software vulnerabilities that were exploited at scale. We haven't in 24 seen as many of those. So we've seen by comparison, phishing taking the top spot. And I think that's always going to continue to be there when you start looking at the use of Gen AI and the fact that just phishing becomes a lot more plausible and harder to detect. We also must think about how API security is becoming more prevalent and interconnected systems in our organizations, right? So how are you as a team connecting, first of all, discovering where you are using API and how are you protecting against that? So if you are looking at ingress-egress traffic, are you cataloging where AI is being used, where APIs are being used, and then do you start to look at each of those as a potential egress point, because they are. And previously compromised credentials. Have a look to see what's out there on the dark web for you. Every customer we speak to when they come in, we do a quick scan of their domain and see what's out there. If you're not doing that already, you can very quickly see that some of your credentials are already leaked out there. They might be appearing in databases that others are buying. All right. If somebody is then getting a whole bunch of your credentials, they will sell that to somebody else who may have a better way of exploiting your environment. And then somebody else has a way of doing something else. So this attack marketplace just speeds things up for everybody. But if you're shifting left and spotting where the threat actor is finding these weaknesses, if you're looking at your attack surface as well, you're going to start to spot what the attacker's spotting and be able to close those doors, get those accounts, passwords changed, etc. So don't wait until you find your data's been exfiltrated and put on a breach site. Find it when some of your credentials have started to pop up. It's fascinating how many times we are still seeing people with credentials that are being reused across multiple different systems. So they end up in a breach over here for whatever system. They might be using their work account to sign up to like a holiday portal or something like that and booking a ticket. And they use the same password to that as they do internally within your business systems. If that system gets breached, it's very easy to then start to then see if that password is going to be reused and is reused in your environment, giving them access. You start to look at how AI can automate that. These threat actors can have their access brokers codified with some better quality scoring. Oh, does this one work? Yes, it does. Great. I can then sell this to you as a validated list of accounts that's going to work. Okay. How about if you were to automate scanning for dark web and perimeter scans and making sure that you have not left software vulnerabilities or config files open, or get that into your SOC as well. Last couple of things. Cloud expertise. Now, I've worked in a SOC for probably the SOC environment for about 15 years. Okay, cloud's not a new thing. Threats in cloud are not new things. But how many of our SOC teams are cloud experts? Not many. We're still trying to play catch up with cloud. And then AI is coming along. We all get diverted to how do we detect what's happening in AI. But for you as organizations, for us in the SOC, multi-cloud, unfortunately, they're all different, right? So us as a SOC person, we're trying to understand, okay, right, now you're using GCP, you've got Azure, you've got AWS. How on earth do I get my SOC to detect the threats in each of these? How do I go hunting? What are the right configs? Yes, it's a pain, but the threat actors are noticing this and they are able to exploit that. Poor configurations, poor security on APIs, weak passwords and weak identities. A lot of the time we're finding that the speed of attack is so low because it's public. In essence, people are able to scan it and get in very quickly. We are seeing organizations where the threat actors, like I said earlier, like with Scattered Spider, they are creating cloud infrastructure to basically stage themselves and sit in. So you need to be understanding, where possible, what is spinning up and down and what's having access where, so that when somebody suddenly starts to create their own dev environment in your account, it's not a developer, it's a threat actor. Are you going to spot that? How do you lock that down? How do you put the guardrails in to minimize the access from these environments? How do you monitor in your SOC account usage and spotting any peaks and troughs and spot that something like that might be happening? But a lot of the stuff that we're seeing within cloud is all around identity, over-permissive accounts, lack of MFA. That's a good starting point here. That really is a solid starting point to go back to the basics on least privilege and zero trust. Because if you're not, the threat actor is going to be exploiting those vulnerabilities. Now, this is another scary bit. I'm sorry, when I come up here, I just feel like I'm filling you all with joy and hope for the future, right? This is a problem when you work in incident response. It's and you bring that back. So, insider risk. What we're seeing is an increase again of nation-state involvement, but also, as I was saying earlier, privileged access abuse, and this is having large-scale impact on organisations. Ranging from IP theft, data exfil, I was saying earlier about creation of shadow IT and misuse of your resources, and also it's around destructive intent. But it's getting a bit worse than that, right? Have you heard of the IT workers, Korean IT workers posing as employees within your organisation? Yeah? How many of you have thought, oh, that's happening out there, it's a rarity, it's not going to be happening with us, you know? Speaking to one of our incident responders on the team last week, and he's dealing with 2 cases this week where we published some IOCs on Unit 42 website a couple of months back, and the client downloaded it and started to do some hunts on what we published, and they picked up the phone and said, we found somebody, right? This threat actor, North Korea, allegedly, had managed to find their way in to work as an employee of your organisation, and they'd been in there for 9 months as a team member. They were quite productive as a team member. They developed code and had actually started to hit their OKRs pretty well. And they're working lots of overtime with the threat actors. So they were one of your, they weren't, when you think about this, you just think there's going to be somebody in there, I'll be able to spot them a mile away. No, this person was actually getting good feedback on their employee progress. So please keep an eye on this. Have a look at our website afterwards and see if you can find the report, or come and have a chat to me at lunchtime. Go and do a hunt on these IOCs. You might have somebody in your IT team that is doing some homework for somebody else. It's worth having a look. What else can you do? 3 things keep being seen time and time again that are having this impact. Complexity. Too many siloed tools not integrating together, which is not only a headache for engineering, it's a headache for your SOC team trying to hunt across and see the attack paths across all of those. Not enough visibility. If you haven't got sight of some of those unmanaged devices, you're not going to spot when somebody is spinning up their own, right? If you're not protecting yourself from partners and suppliers connecting into your network and using secure browser technology and things like that, then you run the risk of not spotting threats there. And too much trust. Please, 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 if we were to do one thing that would cut a lot of these attacks off at their knees, it would be to review your privilege and suddenly spot where there's a lot of over-permissive. It's going, unfortunately, back to basics of cybersecurity, but when we look at these incidents, it does happen because there's been a slip. The threat actor just has to find one of those slips and they're in. So I know I've only got a couple of minutes left on here, but if I were to share some closing thoughts and take a picture of this, or we'll share the slides, but zero trust. Look at visibility into unmanaged assets. Start to look at using things like secure browser technology, and really start to look at how you're utilizing AI and automation and integration within your own teams. If the person is coming up with loads of ideas on how to make things better and faster, give them space, find them space. If not, build a team that is looking at this problem. And start talking to some of us that are in the room today from Palo and others of how we're cracking that automation problem. But create space in your team for the team to be able to make use of that. Because it's not just a technology aspect, it's a culture as well. can't emphasize that enough from the people I talk to. And if you'd like to talk to us more, myself, I'm going to be around at the stand over lunchtime. I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to SOC and SecOps. I'm not a product person. I've sat your side many a time. So I talk about data integrations. I talk about automation and threat-led capabilities and how you can use insights from things like this and what we push out in Unit 42 to learn from what the threat actors do and then build those creative strategies within your own organization to sort of outmaneuver them. But it has to start first from understanding what you're seeing out there and then building testing regimes that act like the threat actor. All right? If you want to learn a little bit more, actually this slide here you can take because they're going to take me off. This slide here, please feel free if you want to connect with me and have another conversation. Always happy to. And if you want to learn more about the insights from the threat report, then you can download it from us. If you don't want to be clicking on a random QR code, I've put the URLs underneath it just because I don't click on random URLs, QR codes. But yeah, if you please follow Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks on LinkedIn. It's different from the Palo Alto, but we push out regularly threat briefings. We don't tend to close off threat intel behind a portal. And we've got a lot of SOC teams out there use our threat intel and bring that in, such as the team that spotted the shadow IT workers. So follow us on LinkedIn. We push stuff out regularly. We've also got a what do you call them? Podcasts. I know that word. A podcast each week talking, and very much that's around C-level security problems and business change, not just in the technical weeds. So thank you. I'm seeing this is a really short slot. For not a lot of time for Q&A. I knew that was going to happen, but I'm going to go camp outside by the stand. If there's anything you want to learn more about, please come and collar me. Otherwise, I look forward to chatting to you all a little later on. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.